What's going on, everybody? JHow here, and in this video we're going to talk about the best guns for Apex Legends in Season 10. We're going to do it by doing a top 10 for Season 10, so you know which are the best guns to pick up off the ground. Now, depending on what weapon style you prefer, you might disagree with some of these, but universally, these are the best guns that you'll see the best players using, so let's get into it. First, we'll give a shout out to the guns that are on the fringe, like the Mastiff, the Peacekeeper, and the Longbow. They're all good in their respective categories and are very good guns to use, but let's focus on the best guns and why they're there. Number 10 on the list is the G7 Scout. While the other guns that I just mentioned could easily fall into this slot, I actually really like the Scout for a map like World's Edge, especially if you're playing ranked. If you get an opportunity to get a bunch of poke damage from a medium range, this acts as the best marksman. I think the Longbow fits similarly into this category, but the Scout is a lot more forgiving. So right now, I think the Scout fits at a healthy number 10 on this slot, but if you don't like the marksman one and you're more of a run and gun style, you might look to put the Mastiff or the PK here to try and compete. Number 9, we've got the Wingman. The Wingman is probably the most hit or miss in terms of any tier list that you have out there. If your name is Ace U, the Wingman might be the best gun in the game. If that's not your name, you might actually find that the Wingman might be much further down on your list, and for a lot of us, probably not even in our top 10. The Wingman still remains a strong gun since the inception of Apex Legends, but right now I think it is a healthy top tier gun in the right hands, but if not, it's seen its way out of this list. All right, next up, the R99. Now, we have seen so many nerfs to the SMGs, but both the Volt and the R9 still remain prominent for a lot of players. I think the R99 has fallen just below the Volt. However, that fast fire, easy recoil control is on the R99. For some of you, the Volt has almost no recoil. For those of you that have been playing Apex since the beginning, you might find the R99 to just be familiar because you've been using it for so long. The R99 will continue to be in the meta. It remains one of the best SMG guns. Now that we've seen the shotguns get nerfed quite a bit, the SMG meta has come back. When the SMGs were very strong, the shotgun meta took a back seat. When the shotguns got buffed up, the SMGs kind of took a back seat, but never really disappeared. They're still really strong, and so is the R99. Right beside it is the Volt. We already mentioned the recoil on the Volt is almost non-existent. A lot of people love this, and it has a lot of damage in the mag. If you like SMGs, it's hard to ever really pass up on the Volt. It's more about resource management and ammo management so that not everybody's using energy ammo. But the Volt still remains one of the top tier guns in Apex Legends. From season to season, this has been a staple for a lot of people for their secondary guns. If you are playing at a high rank or competitive, we saw shotguns take a big tick up, especially when the Gibraltar meta was there. Season 10 has shown a different meta, so we might actually see the R99 and the Volt maybe go up in tier while the EVA 8 goes down. Which brings us to our EVA 8, which is right in the middle. As the season unfolds, we might see the EVA 8 fall down a little. We did see nerfs coming into Season 10, but the EVA 8 still feels really strong. The Bolt nerf, of course, is noticeable, but it isn't a complete nerf to make it not the top tier shotgun. Now, for some people, they prefer the Peacekeeper. Some even like the PK choked up for peeking corners, and in certain situations, other shotguns might be better. But the EVA 8 still remains one of the strongest guns in the game, despite the nerfs. Next up, the Flatline. Similarly to the Wingman, if you don't have control over the Flatline, it's going to feel like a bad gun. But if you've spent any amount of time learning the recoil pattern of the Flatline, you know that this gun absolutely destroys people. It's very strong and it works great at mid and even close range. The hip fire on this is really nice, so if things do get crazy, you can always hip fire this, and it's got a very forgiving pattern on that. At long range, it might be a little bit more difficult for you to control if you throw a 3x on it, but I can promise you, once you figure out this gun's recoil pattern, it's very strong. The light ammo counterpart, the R301, is here, which means that there might be some other guns above this. So the R301 is a staple. It has been the most consistent gun through all of Apex history. There was once upon a time where the 301 actually had a better spray pattern. A A lot of things have been nerfed, but the R301 feels like the most balanced gun in the game. It's beginner friendly, it's very good for pro players, it's all ends of the spectrum. The 301 continues to remain probably the best gun in the game in terms of consistency. Through each season, certain guns get buffs and the 301 kind of falls down. But there's never a time when you watch a high level stream that the 301 isn't being used by at least one person on the team. It's that good. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. This next one is probably a selfish pick, but the L-Star. I have been saying the L-Star has been right on the fringe of being decent for a long time. Now, technically there was a nerf because the LMG headshot did get nerfed going into Season 10, but the L-Star had a lot of buffs. The projectile is smaller, which means tracking is easier. Throw a 2 to 3x on this thing and you can now track your targets a lot easier. The fact that you can now throw a barrel on this as well as an energy mag to mean that you can use more shots during that before it overheats is great. If you're just now playing this game, you might not know what the L-Star has quite been through. But around the end of 2020, the feathering on this, as in shooting, letting it go, and then shooting again, was buffed significantly. And that's what put the L-Star right on the fringe. We're now in a meta where I think the L-Star is really good. I'm starting to see this in almost all of our games, and for me, I think it's still great. I think some people are still adapting, and a lot of people will play the 301 over the L-Star, so these are kind of interchangeable, but it's still a really good gun. Now, you could say that Season 10 is a very heavy ammo meta, because the Flatline, the Rampage, the Prowler, they're all really good, with shoutouts to the Wingman. The Rampage is the new gun here in Season 10, and for this, you have the Rampage coming in to mixed results in terms of not whether it's good or not, but whether it's broken or not. This isn't like the Bocek from Season 9. The Rampage is very strong, even without the thermite in it. I'd also say that the recoil pattern on this thing does take a little bit to get used to because it has a very weird firing pace that we're not used to. But if you do have this without the thermite in it, which does give it faster attack, I'd even say just try single shotting this thing. It still fires about the same speed, but it might be easier for you to control that recoil pattern as a result. So make sure and use the Rampage. It is one of the best guns right now, and we're trying to figure out just where it sits on this tier list. But I do think the Rampage is one of the top tier guns. It puts out a lot of damage very fast. It's actually pretty terrible up close and hip fire range, but that's normally while you have our next gun. Now, our best gun right now feels like the Prowler. If you remember a long time ago, before this went into the care package, they actually nerfed the auto fire pattern on this. So a lot of people even then were using it in burst mode because of the burst damage power of this. They had buffed the damage up to 15 per bullet, meaning that this can really put out some significant burst damage with very little recoil. We find ourselves right back there. With no select fire, the Prowler still feels like a really strong one. And the best part about this is that I mentioned the Rampage right before. The Rampage puts out a lot of damage per bullet, but also at a slower fire rate. Because of that, you can actually carry a Rampage with a Prowler, which is something you don't normally do, is carry two guns of the same ammo type, because you'll probably run out of ammo for one and not have one for the other. The Rampage and Prowler is a great pairing, or the Rampage and any SMG is actually working really well, or even a shotgun to be able to handle those close range fights where the Rampage isn't very strong. But the Prowler, even at close to medium range, the amount of burst damage that comes out with the EVA being nerfed, the Prowler is now the dominant force in close range fights. Now, you might still find people finding priority guns in other areas, but there is no mistaking the extreme power of the Prowler in Season 10 right now. It is dominating close range fights. It is turning things very quickly. One good pump and all of a sudden that other person on the other side is terrified. Two, and now all of a sudden you might even have a knock because that's how much damage this thing can do. But make no mistake about it, there's a lot of guns that might be interchanged on this list based on preferences. The 301 and the L-Star, perhaps. The Rampage might actually be further down than some people think, or it might actually just be the #1 best gun. It really is all about perspective. But the top 10 guns here are the best guns, with the shout out on that number 10 spot, which could be interchangeable with a lot of guns not on this list. So which guns do you think are the best in Season 10? Which weapon do you think is going to be the one that ends up on top of this list within a few weeks or maybe even a few days? when the season really gets rolling. Let me know in the comments below if maybe you think another gun that wasn't on this list should have been on here, and whether you think the Scout might be overrated on this list. Thank you all so much for watching. Till next time, happy hunting. See you again.